All right, so today we're going to be talking about Chapter 11, Lesson 5. This is all about rotations. So when we rotate an object out of the coordinate plane, it literally just means to turn about a point. We could also say spin. That's also a good word, but it means to spin around a point. Now, when we are doing rotations, something that's very helpful is something called tracing paper. So the tracing paper is going to help us with our rotations. So this is tracing paper here. It's very thin. If you notice when I put it down on the paper, you can still see everything through it. That's going to help us. Now, how we're going to do this is wherever we're rotating about this point, what we're going to do is we're going to draw an arrow on the tracing paper pointing up. And the reason why we want to do that is because when we start making our turns, that arrow is going to tell us when we've gone far enough. So, if my arrow starts pointing up, and I make a 90-degree clockwise turn, remember clockwise is going to be going in this direction. 90 degrees means I make one right turn over here. So which means that my arrow is going to be pointing to the right. Now, if I do a 180-degree rotation, that's going to be flipping it completely the opposite way, which means the arrow, instead of pointing up, is now pointing down. And a 270-degree rotation would point in that direction. Now, if we do counterclockwise, that's the opposite direction, which means that it's going to be going in this direction. So if I move a 90-degree counterclockwise, instead of pointing to the right, we're going to be having it point to the left. 180 degrees is still going to be pointing down because regardless if you make a right turn or a left turn, turning all the way around would be pointing in still the opposite direction. And a 270-degree rotation, the arrow would be pointing to the right. Notice how when we do counterclockwise and clockwise, a 90-degree turn, they're pointing in opposite directions. That's because clockwise and counterclockwise are going in opposite directions. So let's utilize that information and the tracing paper to help us with example 1. It says example 1, the triangle JKL has vertices of J3, 1, K3, -3, and L0, -3. So what we're going to do is we're going to plot each one of those points. So J is at 3, 1. This is where J is. K is at 3, -3, so here is where K is. And then L is at 0, -3, so 0, -3, right there. And this here then is my triangle. Now, when I use my tracing paper, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be careful because I don't have much of it. But because we're rotating about the vertex J, J is right here, which means I'm going to point an arrow pointing up from that point. I'm going to trace the rest of the triangle. And I want to label each vertex here as well, so when I do the rotation, I know where they need to go. Now it says 90-degree clockwise rotation. If I look back at the top, 90-degree clockwise means the arrow should be pointing to the right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold my pen on the rotation point and spin my tracing paper until the arrow is pointing to the right, which is right there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift the paper away from each one and put a point where where K should be. So K should be right here. And then L should be right here. Now, keep in mind, we've done a transformation, which means that these are now prime. So this is K prime, this is L prime. So my new triangle looks like that. So now J prime did not change because that was our rotation point. And it's a good thing to check on that, because if it did change, that means we probably did something wrong. K prime now is at negative 1, 1, and L prime is at negative 1, 4. So using the tracing paper helps immensely when trying to figure out how to do the rotations. Now, let's look at the back side. Example 2. It now says triangle ABC has vertices of A, negative 4, negative 4, 1. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. That's where A is. B is at negative 1, 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's B. And C is at negative 2, 1. So here's C. So this is an obtuse triangle. And it says that we want to do a rotation 180 degrees counterclockwise about the origin. So we're going to do the exact same process we did. We're going to use our tracing paper. Because we're going about the origin, that means I'm going to put an arrow pointing up from the origin. I'm then going to trace my triangle. So that's my triangle right there. 180 degrees clockwise or counterclockwise rotation. And if we were to look back, it would show that the arrow should be pointing down. So counterclockwise is going in this direction. And the arrow is now pointing down. Hold the pen over the tracing paper. Here is point A, so A prime now is right here. Do it again. This here is C prime. And last time, here's B, so that means this would be B prime. Trace and connect the dots like so. And there's your rotated triangle, 180 degrees counterclockwise about the origin. So if we were to go through and do this, A was negative 4, 1. A prime now is 4, negative 1. B was negative 1, 4. B prime is now 1, negative 4. And C was negative 2, 1, and now it's 2, negative 1. And that's something to keep in mind. When we are talking about rotations, there can be something very helpful for us to help us figure that out. And that would be something called rotation notation. So this is about the origin, and that's only the origin. When we make a 90 degree clockwise, you can simply do it like this. XY, the original coordinate, the new coordinate after the rotation would become Y, so Y would go first instead of X. And then the X value would become its opposite and become now the Y value of the new ordered pair. For example, if I had an ordered pair of 3, 2, after a 90 degree clockwise rotation, it would become 2, negative 3. 180 degrees clockwise. We did the same thing down here. The only difference is it was counterclockwise, but again, 180 degree rotation, counterclockwise or clockwise, doesn't matter, they're the same. So X and Y become their opposites. So A, if we look down here again, was negative 4, 1. Doing this process here, negative 4 becomes its opposite to 4, and 1 becomes its opposite to negative 1. And that's exactly what we got for A prime. And then a 207 degree clockwise rotation, X and Y become negative Y, and then X. So for example, if I had 3, 2, same thing as up here, they would now become, after a 270 clockwise rotation, 2 would become its opposite to be negative 2, and that goes first. And 3 would stay the same, so this would be negative 2, 3 now. All right, this is the end of lesson 5. If you have any questions, please let me know.